Why hello everyone, and good evening. Welcome back. Third video, no pressure at all. I've finally reached a steady pace of content creation, and there's no rush. My editing and recording skills are at a point where I am efficient enough to take a breather. And yes, I'm bragging there, but I'm kinda proud of myself. I get to sip on some tea, play some Stardew Valley, and relax before I eventually get back to work. Okay, spoiler warning, this game is narrative focused. Alright, let's get into it. Fuck, man. You know, I went into Gris thinking it would be an easy review. I say it's sad, you guys cheer, another video done. I mean, that's the typical order of things. I didn't assume there'd be so much depth to be had. Rather, my guess was that it would be a quality puzzle and platforming game, with an emotional backdrop. But right off the bat, the game hits you with this opening cutscene. My goodness, gracious and godly powers that be, this game is so stunning. I mean, it's absolutely the most beautiful game I played this year. Hands down. I played Last of Us 2 and Ori 2, but this game's hand-drawn world and beautiful animations kicks those games' butts. It's genuinely the first time, and I say this seriously, the first time I have teared up when looking at something beautiful. I used this word a lot in the last video, so I promise to use it only once. This game's beginning is poetry. It's so poetic, honestly it's worthy of Olympus. It's much more powerful to use a symbol as the object of her loss. Her voice, how it flees her as the statue of the woman crumbles. Our information is sparse. We're not given any knowledge save for that her loss is immense. The inability to speak, this indicates so much powerful, overwhelming pain. But we are taught so quickly that the statue protects. That's our one piece of information we are given that we 100% believe. She hides from all the pain and destruction, and is thrown away. The color bleeds out of the screen as her protection is destroyed and she falls through her world. The music swells, and the screen is muted to white and gray. I love the imagery of each color slowly melting away. It's as if the world has become devoid of beauty and love. Now, this intro is gorgeous and incredible, but as every gamer has at one point seen, intros can kick ass, but games can fall flat shortly after. Gris decides to go the other way. The whole world is beautifully drawn, and each of the 5 acts is motivated by a different aspect of grief. The whole game is awesome, is what I'm saying. Gris treks through the colorless world, weak and in pain. She falls and stumbles, struggling to climb through this empty wasteland. It's symbolism that's easy to understand, but nuanced enough to maintain subtlety. And that's a difficult feat to accomplish. I mean, a round of applause for the application of color to grief. It's the first time I've seen any color applied to sadness other than, well, blue. But the developers use as many colors as they can to show Gris' path through the 5 stages of loss. First, white. It's gray nothingness, and it envelops her world. It's a representation of denial. The music takes an upbeat tone, as if nothing has gone wrong. You begin the game with this lightning bolt of an intro, and transition into what seems like a game about being a hero. The music, the puzzles, and the exploration of the world of denial seems as though they will lead to a triumphant ending of saviorhood, and you will retrieve your lost loved one. As the score bounces and the player is introduced to the puzzle mechanics, learning to jump and platform, the only thing reminding you that your protector is gone is the visual experience. Of course, in a game with no dialogue, the story is going to be told through art. You wander, but with purpose. The goal, to save the statue. And the game eggs you on. Here, beat this simple puzzle, your goal is right around the corner. Have fun, there isn't much to struggle against at all. Yes, listen to the pep and bounce in the music. But all the while, The color, or lack thereof, stands watching. It sits there and reminds you of your pain. You approach what should be solace near the end of this section, but you're met with the broken hand of your love, of your protection. This sight fills Gris with burning anger, hatred at the world, and even, perhaps, at herself for letting this tragedy happen. And it restores the color red. Just like that, it feels like a different game. The introduction of color makes the entire game much more beautiful and interesting to look at. The red sweeps across the screen for the first time as a gust of wind, pulling you backwards. It's a mechanic that rips through the serenity, feeling like a piercing blade. Such a violent introduction to pain and its angry expressions. It's as if Gris wants to yell and scream, but with her voice gone, the best she can muster is festering rage. Pure, unbridled, it sits within her. She treks through the unforgiving wasteland of a world consumed by red, scarlet anger. The wind throws you backwards, destroying your progress, and it's deeply painful. Your anger is channeled through Gris, and you're able to power through the challenges. And with this comes a new invigoration to fight for your soul. See, emotional power is really tricky. If you give too much of it, you get soap opera, and everything is way too dramatic. But if you give too little, your experience will become like bland cardboard. But when it hits that balance just right, and I mean just right, that is when you become Journey. This PS3 game is completely devoid of dialogue. It's the predecessor to Gris, and Abzu, and a couple other games. It knows when to throw away puzzles and use beauty to bring tears to your eyes. Gris takes much inspiration from Journey, and quite literally drops you into another black and white world. This time, the room is filled with statues, broken and crying. If you break them with your new ability, you will reveal a secret. The second stage of grief, anger. Then, to complete this section and actually progress, you break through the ground, throwing dark birds up around you. Poof. You've returned. That whole scene was about 15 seconds, and it had the emotional weight of a 30-minute quest in The Witcher 3. Don't get me wrong, I love that game, but visual power should never be underestimated, because it functions perfectly on its simplicity. No lengthy dialogue, no character arcs or cutscenes, just statues. That's all it takes. Statues and context. Moving to the next color. Green. Her world regrows. The once desolate wasteland has become a haven with trees and water and a lush world, but something still feels lost. A puzzle piece is missing. This is the stage of bargaining. Gris, forced through the phases of grief, wishes to trick herself into thinking her loved one still lives. She clings to the light at the end of the tunnel, to the idea that this stone woman can still be saved. It's the most dangerous expression of pain. The common belief is that anger holds the title of most dangerous, but bargaining can trap you inside your own mind. In the green world, Gris makes a friend, bests simple puzzles, and explores a gorgeously drawn forest of trees. She completely loses herself in her mind's world. It's a fun joyride with uplifting abilities, calming music, and delightful artistry. But the world still has an uneasy feeling. Gris doesn't see it, but it all feels too cheery. Have you ever seen someone smile, but felt thrown off? As if their smile is just too happy, that it couldn't be genuine? It's the music and the strange calmness in contrast to the previous world that indicates coming danger, like the calm before the storm. Bosses in puzzle games are a nasty monster to conquer. The question is always how to make the boss feel like an extension of the platforming and brainpower used in the rest of the game. There are 2 correct answers, like this and like this. If you're not doing it like those games, you're doing it wrong. Gris is just like those games, and boy does it get it right. You float and jump up this massive tower, boosting between bird spots that shoot you higher, and floating with the bird who chases you. Her screams push you across ledges, and platforming trick after platforming trick, Gris does one thing that Ori, a game I praise for its boss fights, does not do. You don't even have to fight the boss in the game. It continues on, using platforming and puzzle methods to knock the boss away. The genius here is that there is no diversion from the rest of the game. It is all cohesive. Instead of the boss feeling plopped in or out of place, it is simply meshed with the power of the puzzles. Gris does have one confusing aspect that I'd assume was simply necessary for players to track their progress. The hub of the world acts as the place to claim new abilities and complete the constellations above. The main complexity that isn't overcome, but rather created because of this hub, is the loss of adventure. At the start, the game seems as though you will embark upon a journey, on the level of Gulliver's Travels and the long walk to Mordor, stepping deeper and deeper into the despair that Gris faces. But with the use of the main hub, that once beautiful feeling of exploration is muddled. Each time you return, you feel a little less and less excited to go on to the next possibility. A bit more linearity might solve this. Save the hub for one moment, after the boss fight. While the tension is high, the familiar location could serve as a way to calm the player down, and let them reflect upon the events that have transpired. Use this as a turning point in the game that demonstrates Gris' realization that her loss is real, her departation from the world of denial and bargaining. The introduction of blue brings water to the world. It is the crushing depths of the world that break Gris down, making her feel small and in pain. The feeling of helplessness and hopeless fear is the greatest danger to the human mind. Gris is nearly crushed by the water surrounding her, like depression crushing a spirit. Quick side point, but the water section is the strongest in the game, in terms of design. 6 new mechanics are introduced and used sparingly for their own puzzles, and they all feel interesting and novel. Every puzzle is complex and creative, and the developers clearly made strides to emphasize uniqueness in every corner of the subterranean world. The finale of the Water Wonderland is the chase. Gris is hunted by the Eel of the Depths, a manifestation of her descent into sadness. If she lets go, it will take her fully, devouring her whole and consuming her will to move forward. So she fights, with life and energy, and still it almost takes her. Sometimes, no matter your will to live, sorrow and loss can destroy you all the same. But Gris is saved by hope. She returns to the world of light, the world of freedom. What do you know, the next color is yellow, and the mechanic introduced is the transfer of light. It's almost as if the game already knows what I'm going to say. Slowly, Gris journeys toward the humbling power of acceptance, the final stage of grief that, to an unweathered viewer, is impossible to comprehend. I found myself wondering how to accept that a person you love is gone, and I landed upon a difficult conclusion. Perhaps to achieve true acceptance, one must decide that honoring the beauty of their life is to make your own life beautiful. To not be swept away by depression and pain, but rather to flow with it and incorporate beauty and love into that loss. It was right about here where I took a step back. This game was making me question how to overcome depression, and I needed to take a day to think. A day turned into 3 and then 6, but finally, after much ado, I was able to write my review. My realization was that, with enough power, games are the most evocative medium. Pulling your eyes through a character's is the strongest empathic connection I know of. I voraciously consume books and love visual media, But the interactivity of a video game is the perfect way of saying you must walk a mile in another's shoes to truly understand them. This is what so many games strive for. The emotional straining and her footsteps along the path to revitalization are beautiful. Gris is not a game about pain. Gris is about beauty, about finding life again, about accepting what happens, and about celebrating the power and majesty of love. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.